It's Patrick Hutzel from IntensiveCareHotline.com, where we instantly improve the lives of families of critically ill patients in intensive care, so that you can have peace of mind, real power, real control, and so that you can influence decision making fast, even if you're not a doctor or a nurse in intensive care. In last week's blog, I've shown you why having a loved one critically ill in intensive care is a once-in-a-lifetime situation and why you can't afford getting it wrong. You can check out last week's blog by clicking on the link below this video. In this week's blog, I want to show you how you can design your critically ill loved one's destiny while they are in intensive care. Having a loved one critically ill in intensive care is nothing short of being a challenge, and it's nothing short of being a once-in-a-lifetime experience. And the level of fear, frustration, stress, struggle and vulnerability you and your family are experiencing leave you without peace of mind, without control, without power and without any influence whatsoever. In fact, it's the last thing on your mind, and if you are like 99% of families of critically ill patients in intensive care, it's not even on your radar. This is even more important if your critically ill loved one is in one of the following situations, such as they are very unstable and in a very critical condition, or they are in a life-threatening situation, or they are in intensive care for long-term treatments and long-term stays, or they have a severe head or severe brain injury, or even worse, they are approaching their end of life in intensive care. After having worked with literally thousands of critically ill patients and their families in intensive care in more than 15 years intensive care nursing in 3 different countries, I have seen and learned that especially in those difficult and challenging situations, you, your family and your critically ill loved one are at the mercy of the intensive care team, and peace of mind, control, power and influence are not even words you could remotely think about when your loved one is critically ill in intensive care. And I know it's not your fault, because you and your family tend to be paralyzed by fear, and you and your family have also been wrongly conditioned by society to trust hospitals, to trust the intensive care team and to basically have blind faith. Furthermore, on a conscious or on a subconscious level, you and your family also feel intimidated by the intensive care team. What's even more important is that you and your family in those situations are lost and you have no idea what to do. And you have no idea that you and your family can have peace of mind, control, power and influence if your loved one is critically ill in intensive care. If only somebody showed you how you can powerfully position yourself during this once-in-a-lifetime challenge. Once you know that you can have peace of mind, control, power and influence, then the next step for you and your family is to design your critically ill loved one's destiny, irrespective of the challenges that you, your family and your critically ill loved one are facing. How do you do that? And how can you design your critically ill loved one's destiny whilst they are critically ill in intensive care? Well, the reality and the fact of the matter is that if your critically ill loved one is in intensive care and they are facing one of those massive challenges where they are very unstable and in a very critical condition, or if they are in a life-threatening situation, or if they are in intensive care for long-term treatments and long-term stays, if they are having a severe head or brain injury, or if they are even approaching their end of life in intensive care, you need to know that in those challenging and difficult situations, the intensive care team's concern, more often than not, are things like: number 1, will we make money if we continue treating your critically ill loved one, or will we lose money if we continue treating your critically ill loved one? Or they worry about number 2, Do they need the ICU bed that your critically ill loved one is currently occupying for other admissions? Which one do we want? Or which other patients do we need to prioritize? Or the intensive care team worries about number 3. Does the intensive care team think that your critically ill loved one will have future and perceived quality of life? As a matter of fact, the intensive care team often bases their decision making on a triple hypothesis. Number 1 is future. It's a hypothesis about what's about to happen. Number 2 is perceived, which is an individual's or a group's perception about something that may or may not reflect reality. And number 3, quality of life, which is something that cannot be measured or quantified and is up to an individual's judgment and is therefore a hypothesis as well. Therefore, the intensive care team often bases their decision about the care and treatment they offer or don't offer on the perceived and future outlook on the quality of life of your critically ill loved one outside of intensive care, which is an area the intensive care team has really no idea about, because they are the experts in intensive care and they are not the experts outside of intensive care, and they, generally speaking, have no idea how well your loved one will do after their stay in intensive care and in hospital. The intensive care team also worries about number 4, which is medical research. One of the biggest interests of the intensive care team is medical research. In fact, the intensive care team is often so heavily involved in medical research that the care and treatment, as well as the positioning of your critically ill loved one's prognosis and diagnosis, are heavily dependent on the medical research interests of the intensive care team and the intensive care unit. As a matter of fact, medical research tends to attract 5, 6 or even 7-figure dollar funding per year, and is therefore a major force behind treatment and care offered and given to critically ill patients in intensive care. For example, if your critically ill loved one has been in intensive care for 4 weeks with a severe head and brain injury and is not waking up, you and your family might get told that a withdrawal of treatment or a limitation of treatment might be, quote unquote, in the best interest of your critically ill loved one. What the intensive care team is really saying is that they don't want to spend any more time, resources and emotional energy, and they also think that your critically ill loved one's case may not fall into a medical research category. Therefore, they deem your critically ill loved one's case as a case that's not of any interest for the intensive care team, and they therefore want to reallocate those resources to other patients that they deem as financially viable and where they can continue doing medical research. On the other hand of the spectrum, if your critically ill loved one is really approaching their end of life and is really dying in intensive care, the intensive care team may suggest to you and your family that a continuation of treatment would be, quote unquote, in the best interest of your critically ill loved one, and they may suggest that your critically ill loved one has a real chance of recovery, only to find that the positioning of the intensive care team is driven by their medical research interests, and they want to continue doing medical research on your critically ill loved one, therefore unnecessarily prolonging your critically ill loved one's suffering. The bottom line and the fact of the matter is that the intensive care team's interests are manifold, and they therefore heavily depend on the politics, the dynamics, the power play, the intrigue, the psychology and the hidden agendas in an intensive care unit. The way the intensive care team frames and positions your critically ill loved one's diagnosis and prognosis therefore heavily depends on what's happening behind the scenes. What's happening behind the scenes is an area that the intensive care team is trying to hide away from you at any cost, and the last thing they want is for you and for your family that you even get a glimpse about what's happening behind the scenes in intensive care. The reality and the fact of the matter are that once you know what's happening behind the scenes in intensive care, that's the time when you can design your critically ill loved one's destiny. Once again, the intensive care team is very shrewd and adept when it comes to the positioning of your critically ill loved one's prognosis and diagnosis, and they will twist and turn your critically ill loved one's prognosis and diagnosis according to their liking and according to their agenda. The reality and the fact of the matter is that if you want to design your critically ill loved one's destiny, irrespective of the challenges that your critically ill loved one is facing and irrespective of what's happening behind the scenes, you and your family need to be very different from the other 99% of families of critically ill patients in intensive care who don't have peace of mind, who don't have control, who don't have power, and who don't have any influence. Once you and your family know what questions you need to ask, once you and your family know what's happening behind the scenes in intensive care, once you know and understand the politics, the dynamics, the power play, the intrigue, the psychology, and the hidden agendas in an intensive care unit, that's when you know how to design your critically ill loved one's destiny. How do you do that? And how can you even have more peace of mind, more control, more power, and more influence whilst your loved one is critically ill in intensive care? Well, you get to that all-important feeling of peace of mind, control, power, and influence when you download your free Instant Impact Report now by entering your email below. In your free Instant Impact Report, you learn quickly how to get peace of mind, real power, and real control, and how you can influence decision making fast whilst your loved one is critically ill in intensive care. Your free Instant Impact Report gives you an in-depth insight that you must know whilst your loved one is critically ill or is even dying in intensive care. Sign up and download your free Instant Impact Report now by entering your email below. In your free Instant Impact Report, you learn how to speak the secret intensive care language so that the doctors and the nurses know straight away that you are an insider and that you know and understand what's really happening in intensive care. In your free report, you will also discover how to ask the doctors and the nurses the right questions. Discover the many competing interests in intensive care and how your critically ill loved one's treatment may depend on those competing interests. How you can eliminate fear, frustration, stress, struggle, and vulnerability even if your loved one is dying. You get 5 killer tips and strategies helping you to get on the right path to peace of mind, control, power, and influence in your situation. You'll get real-world examples that you can easily adapt to your and your critically ill loved one's situation. How to stop being intimidated by the intensive care team and how you will be seen as equals. You'll get crucial behind-the-scenes insight so that you know and understand what's really happening in intensive care and how you need to manage doctors and nurses in intensive care, and it's not what you think. Thank you for tuning into this week's blog, and I'll see you again in another update next week. Make sure you also check out our Your Questions Answered section, where we answer your questions, or send me an email to support@intensivecarehotline.com with your questions. This is Patrick Hutzel from intensivecarehotline.com, and I'll see you again next week with another update.